Coaches, today we're going to go through the Counter Trey RPO. I'll get into the introduction here once we get into the next few slides. Why we do the things that we do, let's talk about that first. So the reason this is a huge part of our offense is because our goal, or any football coach's goal, should be to get the defensive players to do exactly what they're coached to do and still be wrong. If you can get a defensive end, for example, to do exactly what he's coached to do, meaning if they see Counter Trey, he closes hard and chases it down from behind because that's what his coach has taught him to do. And don't worry about the quarterback. Chase it down from behind. If you can get him to do exactly what he's coached to do and still feel like he's wrong, like he could have made the tackle on the quarterback, okay, that's what we're trying to accomplish here with these RPOs. We want that kid to go over to his coach and start questioning, why his coach is telling him to do what he's doing when it's not working, where he feels it's not working. So creating frustration in the defense is a huge reason to run RPOs. We simplify everything for our kids. So all of our RPOs are basically just an if this, then that. Okay, so we have a pre-snap read, which we'll get into, and then we have a post-snap read, which we'll get into. And this RPO specifically is 50 to 60% of our offense year in and year out. Okay, so this Counter Trey RPO accounts for 50 to 60% over the last 7 years of our entire run game in our offense. Then we'll get into splits, splits for the O-line, splits for the backs, splits for the wide receivers. We'll talk about those in great detail once we get into this thing here. The backfield alignment, why we line up in flat backs for Counter Trey. We want it to look like we're running outside zone. We want it to look like we're running bucks, we call it our sweep read RPO, which is just basically a buck sweep RPO. And then we also want it to look like our power read, okay, which is an inverted veer read option basically. Okay, so we want this inside run concept to look like our outside run concepts. And we'll get into that into great detail here once we start looking at some film clips. The blocking scheme, we'll talk about the arc block with the tight end. It's if you play with the tight end, using the tight end to arc block onto that outside linebacker really makes, when you pull the ball with your quarterback or when you attack those defensive ends, the arc block on the outside linebacker is the block that determines whether you're going to have a 5-yard gain or you're going to go yard for a touchdown. Okay, so we'll talk about those things. If you run it away from the tight end, we'll talk about how you can manipulate the defense with your formation and where you place your tight end. We'll go through this concept in a 2x2 set, a 3x1 set, multiple 3x1 sets, and a 2-back set. Okay, so we'll show you all of the different looks that we give to run the same play. So we'll run this same concept out of 100-some different formations, and it's the same thing for the guys that matter. So up front, the offensive line, those 5 most important guys do the same thing no matter what every single time. So there's no confusion with them. And we'll go through how to make all that easy for you. And then we'll go through the mesh and the QB carry out of his fake. That's probably one of the most important things in this RPO is the quarterback carrying out his fakes, because you can hold extra players that are unblocked on the backside. Okay, then we'll talk about the pass options off of it. So we'll go through those out of trips. We use a couple of different things that we'll go through. Then I'll show it to you out of a spread set and what the receiver's responsibilities are and how the quarterback determines pre-snap where he's going with the football. And then I'll go through all of our favorite formations that we run this out of. And then we'll talk about the specialties that we have off of this. So just little wrinkles and things to make this concept even harder to scout and pick up on by the defensive players and the defensive coordinator. Okay, so let's dig into the material here. All right, before you do anything else, we have to go through our alignment and splits. Our offensive line and tight ends all take 3-foot splits or 1-yard splits. So even if we have a tight end, he would also have a 3-foot split. Our quarterback's heels are at 5 yards. So his heels are at 5. Our tailback lines up, and that goes for our tailback and our H-back. So if we have an H-back over here, our halfback, their heels are 6 inches to 1 foot in front of the quarterback's toes. And the reason we do that is so that when he turns to take meshes, they don't run into each other. Okay, so their shoulder pads, his shoulder pads don't hit his elbows and knock the ball loose and things like that. We want the quarterback to have to reach a little bit to make the handoff. And then the back's alignment depends on their speed as far as width. So ideally, we want his outside shoulder splitting the crotch of the tackle. So if the kid's a little bit slower, we'll move him in and just put his outside shoulder in the B gap or line him up directly in the middle of the B gap. And we haven't had anybody that we've had to line up anywhere on the guard, but generally we stay from dead smack in the middle of the guard and center, so in that, or the guard and the tackle, excuse me, in that B gap, to his outside shoulder in splitting the center of the tackle. Okay, so that's our alignments. We'll go into the receiver alignments once we get to the pass portion of this clinic. So let's head on to the O-line play. All right, to get started here, we're just going to go through the basics of the offensive line play. And the beauty of this is that the offensive line, the 5 guys up front, do the same thing no matter what anybody outside of the box does. So the only guys they are concerned with are the 6 guys that are in the box. Okay, and I'm going to show you clips of sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less, and what to do about those things. But for right now, let's just take a typical 6-man box and look at how to block Counter Trey. Okay, so to start, let's say we're running it to the left here, and I'll go through the quarterbacks and the backs and all that stuff later. We're just focusing on the offensive line. We'll start with our left guard and our left tackle here. They have what we call a deuce rule. The left guard and the left tackle are to deuce through the B gap to the opposite backer. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if there's a guy in the B gap, if there's a 3 technique, they're going to combo him back to the mic. But in this case, there is no 3 technique. We have a shade instead, so the guard's going to block back on the nose, and the tackle's going to go down through the B gap, staying as tight as he can to the mic. Your center is going to block back on the 3 technique. And I know a lot of coaches will say that this is, it's an impossible block. It's something that can be done. Well, I'll show you tons of clips where we do it every game, multiple times a game. Okay, it's all about the angle that the center takes to block back on the 3 technique. You need to know in advance what the defense's scheme is, what the 3 technique's job is. So we're going to block back on the 3 technique. The right guard is going to scrape as tight as he can to those linemen that are leaving to get his hat on the inside shoulder of that defensive end. Okay, he's going to kick out the defensive end. And then your right tackle is going to take the same path, and he's going up and through to the buck backer. Okay, so that's how we would block Counter Trey to the left or to a shade technique. All right, and on our Counter Trey RPO, our post snaps, we have a pre-snap read and a post-snap read, which we'll get into later. We have our post-snap read is by the quarterback, and he is reading this backside defensive end. So we'll get into what happens if he closes or wrong arms as opposed to if he stays upfield and has contained. We'll get into all that stuff later. So right now we're just going through the very basics. Let's take a look at this, running it the other way to the right or to the 3 technique, which means our deuce rules apply. So now we have a B gap defender in that tackle, the 3 technique. We're going to go down through the B gap, and we're going to combo to that backside backer. If the backer spills over the top, the tackle's going to take him. If he comes underneath, the guard's going to take him. Okay, and our rules are the tackle does not leave unless that buck backer comes over the top. So the tackle's job is to drive the 3 technique all the way down across into the buck backer's lap. That's the goal. We're going to block back on the nose. That's a fairly easy block. We're going to kick out, same rules on the end, hat on the inside, and we're up and through. Notice it's going to hit a little bit wider. Unless your tackle's a monster over there, it's going to hit wider because it's going to hit in the B gap instead of the A gap. So there's your basic Counter Trey blocking scheme. So no matter which way we call it, no matter what you see out of all the birds, so wherever the receivers are, doesn't matter. You could be a trips, 2x2, tight end, no tight end. These are the rules that the offensive linemen stick by no matter what. So let's go into that next, because we'll talk about how to use a tight end to make sure that the offensive line still does the same thing no matter what. Okay, now if you have a tight end, you're either going to get a 6-eye or he might be on the inside shoulder of the tight end. He might play on the outside shoulder, and they might bring that Sam backer inside. But let's just say they're playing the defensive end inside and the outside backer on the outside. So again, nothing changes. In this case, our tight end's rule is always to arc block and I'll show you video clips of that later on, is going to arc block to the Sam backer, to that outside linebacker. Everybody else is doing the same thing. So if we are running it, let's just say to the nose guard here, it'll look like this. And he's down through the B gap, and we're still going to read this guy. If our game plan for the week is to run, and you can do this both ways in any game plan, doesn't matter, but if your game plan for the week is to run it to that widened out defensive end to make the angles better, you're going to deuce, block back, kick out, up and through. Now, what this does is it's going to widen that defensive end, because if your tight end takes that arc block and releases sideways from the defensive end, if he releases straight sideways from that defensive end, most defensive ends' responsibility is to get hands on the tight end, right? So what's he going to do? Well, he's going to automatically widen with that tight end to try to get his hands on him, and then he's going to open up this gap even wider, so now your gap gets bigger to run the ball through. So either way is good. You know, it's a game plan thing. It's a defensive scheme thing also. So let's look if they don't play a 6-eye like that, if they put the end on the outside and the backer in the middle. Let's look at something where you could get a different type of alignment. Okay, if you get an alignment like this where the outside backer's on the inside, now your defensive end is already widened. You're going to arc block to that end, to the backer. So again, we're still going to take the same steps. So we're going to step here to get him to widen even more, and then we're going to go an inside release to get that Sam backer. Now, he needs to get the Sam backer, so if he feels that Sam backer is going to blitz, it's okay to go straight at him. There's nothing wrong with that, because the defensive end is still going to try to make sure he gets hands on the tight end and pull himself out of the play. We'll deuce back, block back on the nose, kick out, which is real long, and we made that hole even bigger, right? So it doesn't matter how the defensive front lines up, and it doesn't matter how your backers line up. You notice that all the adjustments are going to come from your skill players. So for your offensive linemen, the rules are the rules, okay? So they've done the same in every look that I've showed you so far, okay? Nothing has changed. And if you're in a spread look where the outside backer's out in coverage, or your strong safety, or just depending on the defense, 4-4, 4-3, whatever it is, you know, you're typically going to get, if you're in any kind of spread look, trips look, whatever, you're typically going to get 6 guys in the box or less. So it makes it really simple. Okay, now let's go through the backfield stuff. So let's say we're running it to let's say we're going to run it to the shade. Okay, so our back would line up opposite the play call. So if we're running our Counter Trey read option to the left, our back is going to line up opposite the play call. We line him up. His heels are 6 inches in front of the quarterback's toes, 6 inches to a foot, just depending on the kid, and that's so they don't run into each other. He's going to jab step, and then he's going to take the handoff. And the reason we jab step is because we do a lot of sprint out stuff. It looks like our sprint out. It gives the tailback that extra half a second he needs to let the offensive linemen that are pulling and kicking out to get out in front of him. So, again, the scheme is the same, and the tailback is just going to follow the tackle. The quarterback is going to reach, ride the fake, and then he's got a few options depending on what the formation is. He's going to read this defensive end post snap. So if that defensive end closes, we have options where he can pull it and run depending on the formation, and then we have options where he can throw off of that. So keeping it as simple as possible, I would say 75% of the time in every game plan, post snap, we don't have a throw option. So the throw option in this RPO comes pre-snap. Now, we do have calls off of that. I'm not saying that we never do it, but most of the time we formate it so that it's easy for the kids. They have either you do this or that. If you see this, you do this. If you see this, you do this, to keep it simple. There's no if this, if this, if this, if this, then that, then that. Like, that gets too confusing. So 75% of the time in all of our game plans, the post-snap read is read the defensive end, pull the ball, the receivers will block the outside linebackers, and, you know, the goal on any play is to get 5 yards, and if it goes more than that, great. So he's reading that defensive end. If the defensive end is to latch onto that tackle and try to chase down the back in the backfield, then, you know, we're running to green. if their scheme is to sit here and step up field, that's fine. He's got two options, okay? When he sees that guy come off upfield, he knows he's handing it off, right? So he can either run at him, which can be good or bad, depending on whether you have a quarterback that, you know, is you want carrying the football a lot or getting hit every once in a while, like what type of kid it is. If he's a pass first kind of guy, he's a pocket passing quarterback, then just have him flip his hips and act like he's throwing the ball out here, and that'll hold both of those guys even better. So again, that's completely up to you. You can have, if he's a big part of your run game, then you can also have him, you know, step in here and seal off that defensive end. Okay, but if you know going into it that his job is just to come up field and make sure he has contain, then you don't have to worry about that. He can step forward and he's fine. You don't got to worry about him getting lit up. And those same rules apply if we have a tight end. So if there's a tight end over here, that doesn't change anything. It just widens out the end and makes it easier on the quarterback to make that decision and make that read. And if it does come out here and his job is, well, I don't know why anybody would do this, but even if he is out here, or even if he's in a 6-eye, if he's in either of those spots and his job is to latch onto the tackle, that's nearly impossible. So you're pretty much guaranteeing if you see a 6-eye or a ghost 9 or something crazy where he's outside the tight end, then you don't have to worry about your quarterback pulling the ball. You don't have to worry about him tackling the running back from behind. You're pretty much set to know that you can hand it off every single time. Okay, the second look that we have is with our backfield sets is our Q tag. So if we call Counter Trey with a Q tag, that means the quarterback is going to keep the ball. So if this fits your system, great. If it doesn't, then don't worry about this one. But we over the past 6-7 years, we've had quarterbacks that could run. So we also incorporate this into our system. So let's just say now we're running our Q tag. So we're going to run it to the left this time. The tailback is going to mesh with the quarterback, and then he's going to seal off that defensive end, making sure that he doesn't chase down the quarterback from behind. We're going to block back. We're going to block back. We're going to kick out. We're going to up and through. We're going to block deuce back through to the mic. And the quarterback is going to reach, ride, and then he's going to follow the tackle. Okay, so this is a quarterback run. So that's what our Q tag is. So that's two different looks at Counter Trey. And the only thing it changed anything for was the tailback and the quarterback. Offensive line, receivers, everybody else does exactly the same thing. Okay, so for all the guys that matter, nothing changes. Two guys need to know, really, and really your quarterback needs to know because he can tell the tailback. If this is a big part of your offense, you don't got to worry about it. You do this so many times in practice that it's just, the Q tag means, okay, the running back knows when he sees your Q tag, okay, the quarterback's keeping the ball, I got to go the other way. And he's going to seal off that guy. Now, sometimes the tailback's eyes are not on the mesh. The tailback's eyes are on that defensive end. So if he sees right away that he's trying to latch onto that tackle, it's okay to abort the fake and try to scrape that defensive end off that tackle to make sure that our quarterback runs free. So there's your Q tag. When we are in a 2-back set, we do a couple of different things. In our game plan, it depends on what defense we're playing. If we're playing against a 2-high shell, we'll do certain things. If we're playing against a 1-high shell like this, we'll do certain things. So if we're playing just a typical 4-4 cover 3 team, let's go through that because that's what most youth football teams run, and it's also, or some kind of 50 front, and then high school teams. Most, if you're in a heavier set, a 2-back set of some type, they're usually playing some kind of cover 3. Okay, so if we're in a 2-back set, we have a couple of different options. If you're coaching a youth football team, I wouldn't do any of the post-snap read stuff. That's just irrelevant. Anything up through like 8th grade, I would not do any post-snap reads on throws for your RPOs. Just make it a run. Pre-snap, though, it's okay to do this because your quarterback, if you're thinking, like, be the kid. If it's before the snap, he's looking to see if he can throw his quick screen first. Then he's seeing, okay, the quick screen's not there. I know we're running the football. And if you're in a 2-back set, he doesn't have to worry about reading anybody because we're blocking the read man. So in our offense, our H's responsibility is to always block the read man. So if we call Counter Trey to the left here, same scheme, just like we discussed before, the H-back's job is to block the read man, which would be this defensive end. Tailback's going to jab step, and he's going to get the football and follow the tackle. But before the snap, the quarterback has a read whether he can throw the ball or not. So if you're playing a 4-4 cover 3 team, and the corners are 10 yards off. The sandbacker's well inside, splitting the difference between your slot receiver and the tackle. Your free safety's off, and you get a look like this. We would throw this quick screen every time. Okay, and here's our rules for our quick screen. And I've done a whole clinic on just how we block and run and do everything with our quick screen, so you can find that on the website. If you go to iCoach.Football, it's on our blog. You can get it there, or if you're one of our members, it's in there also. There's a bunch of clinics on it. But quick screen rules, real quick. Pre-snap: if the quarterback likes to throw, the slot receiver is going to block the most dangerous guy, which in this case would be the sandbacker. The outside receiver is going to take one step forward, turn around, catch the football, and he is trying to stay outside. And the reason for that is because of our splits, and we'll get into that in a little bit later once we get more heavy into the passing stuff. But that's our basic this is it. If we're in a 2-back set, this is it. Pre-snap, we're either throwing the quick screen or we're handing it off to the tailback. So the quarterback's not carrying the ball. So if you have a pocket passing quarterback, and that's why you like to run a lot of 2-back stuff, then my recommendation would be do this. Our H-back we call him an H-back because he's half-back, half-wide receiver. You can sub a fullback in or whatever it is that you do. We go no huddle and play as fast as we can. We try to run a play every 13 seconds at the high school level. So most of the time we're waiting on the refs more than anything else, not our kids. Okay, so we play extremely fast. And, our quick screen, we can throw it either way. If we play a 2-high team that plays quarters a lot, so let's just say, let me change the color here. Same thing, 2-back set. Let's say we get a 2-high shell. And in high school, most teams don't press with their corners. So if we get this same off corner in a 2-high shell, where this strong safety's off the ball, this guy's doing the exact same thing. We'll turn and throw it to this guy naked with no blockers because he's got a 10-yard cushion to win to make one guy miss to stay outside. Okay, so if the field's to that side, we'll also throw it completely naked over there to him. Okay, so it just depends on, what the defense that we're playing against, and that's all stuff that you got to scheme as a football coach. Okay, but our 2-back stuff, this is it. Okay, so we have 2 options. First one is the quick screen. Then we do that with our youngest groups all the way up through 8th grade, and then when they get into high school, in some situations, depending on the defense, we'll throw our post-snap read into there. And our post-snap read is really simple. Quarterback, when the ball is snapped, we have what we call a stick concept. So if the ball gets snapped and we have our stick concept for the week instead of the screen in our 2-back set, the quarterback is reading the sandbacker. If he steps down on the end of the line of scrimmage like he's blitzing, if he comes late in his blitzing, his eyes are on this guy right here, and our slot receiver is just going to replace where he was standing, and we will turn and pull the ball from the tailback, and we will replace him with the ball. And then both guys are running the same thing. It's not really a 3-step slant. It's pretty much just same spacing, keep the same distance, about 5 yards apart, 5 to 7 yards apart, and he's taking one jab step to the outside and getting straight there. He's taking one jab step to the outside and catching the football. And again, we don't do that every week. It's only if the defensive scheme fits that. And if you're coaching anything under the JV varsity level, I for sure would not even use this in your system. Just stick with the quick screen stuff. It works. The other thing you can do, and we do this at the high school level, we just have our route based on our formation. So if we have our inside guy in our formation wise, if we have our inside guy on the line of scrimmage, these two know that we are automatically running our quick screen routes post snap. If we have it the other way and we have the slot receiver is off the line and the outside receiver is on the line, we're running bubble. Okay? So it's just 2 different wrinkles to make the same play to us. For everybody in here, nobody's doing anything different. These two just know that if this guy is on the line of scrimmage, we're running bubble. That's our routes. If this guy is off the line of scrimmage, okay, we are running our quick screen. Okay, so very simple. The less with this, the better. And if I could pick honestly one football play to run as a youth football coach, if I could pick one play and say just install this and only run this play and get away with it, other than like a couple passes off of this, like maybe just like verts and, you know, a streak and an out just to mix it up, I would say this is the one scheme you could run over and over and over again out of a bunch of different formations, and you'll get 100 different looks throughout the game. And to the defense, it looks crazy, but to your kids, the guys that matter are doing the same thing every single snap. Okay, so that's our 2-back stuff with our Counter Trey RPO. Now you can go ahead and proceed to part 2 of the Counter Trey RPO web clinic.